a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
My gosh.
Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not.
That is the LNS, dude.
Well, if there's like...
Look at that thing.
It's rotating.
Nickel 6-1 Tango Project.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
So you're looking at this video that shows Navy pilots freaked out by seeing something and they don't know what it is. I call it a UFO. I'm David Hoffman, filmmaker, and the video you just saw has recently been released by the government after somebody leaked it to the press. And what it shows is potentially a UFO, a unidentified flying object. Now, I believe these guys when they're freaked. I believe what they're seeing is a UFO. But let me tell you why I believe that. So first of all, I'm 15 years old. I'm in Levittown, Long Island. I come out one night because we're looking at Sputnik, and Sputnik is supposed to be flying overhead, the first satellite. And there's an old guy in the next door, and he says to me, hey, you know, I believe in UFOs. And I said, really? What? Why do you believe that? He said, because I've seen them. I was in the Navy, and I saw a UFO. Freaked me out. Okay, I became a UFO sort of interested party. And now I'm a professional. I'm in my early 30s. I'm doing political films. It's part of my job. And one of the films I'm doing is interviewing George Bush when he is running for vice president with Ronald Reagan on an airplane. I'm not the interviewer, I'm the director. I set up the scene, they're on the airplane. George Bush is drinking like crazy, and the sound man is in the back with me, and there's a wireless mic on George Bush. And George Bush is talking to the interviewer, and the cameraman is getting ready. He hasn't started shooting yet. And all of a sudden, my sound man sitting next to me in the seat goes, whoa! And he turns off the sound, stops recording, stops listening. David, what I just heard freaked me out. What'd you hear? His name was Nigel. What'd you hear, Nigel? Nigel said, I heard George Bush say, hey, you know those little green people? They're real. I saw one dead. Could George Bush have seen a dead alien? You know, I think so. That's what he said to the sound man. Not on tape, unfortunately. Sound man is just listening. But the sound man and I never forgot it. So you're about to see a documentary done way back when with people who believe in UFOs, who've either seen them, been involved with them, and I guess I'm one of those weirdos who believes it's real. Now, before I run this, let me just answer a few questions. Do I believe aliens are among us? I don't know. Looks like they could be. If they are, we know they're peaceful, thank God, because they would have killed us a long time ago. Have they been here a long time? I don't know, but it seems like when you look at these kind of Greek and Roman stuff and this medieval stuff, you see what look like aliens. I know it's weird. I know many of you don't believe it. But looking at this video that's been released this year by the government, who admits they don't know what they are, and you listen to these Navy guys talking about what these things are doing, how fast they move, what directions they go in, what are they? It ain't the Russians, it ain't the Chinese, and apparently it's not us. So take a look at this documentary, and in the comments, let me know what you think. Am I crazy, or am I onto something?
This is not a crater on the moon. This is an IFO, Identified Flying Object. A man, not Superman, jetting in a Bell Aerosystems rocket belt. This is a UFO, Unidentified Flying Object, popularly called a flying saucer. To responsible scientists and photoanalysts, they are lenticular clouds, sundogs, planets, balloons, or mirages. A real flying saucer looks like this, an Avrocar manufactured in Canada, being test flown in 1961. Or like this free-flying air-cushioned vehicle being flown by its inventor, Professor Paul Moeller, in 1965. But UFO sightings persist, and skeptics often become confirmed believers.
I've slowly come to the conclusion that there are such things as interplanetary spaceships. I'll have to stick my neck out and say that because I believe it at long last.
Psychiatrists often call these reported UFO sightings illusions, hallucinations, self-delusions. The great flying saucer mystery of 1966 began here, near Dexter, Michigan, late in March. Before the month was out, flying saucers were being reported from New Jersey to California, from Colorado to Long Island, from Ohio to Georgia. Invariably, the first reports were brought in by quiet and sober citizens like Frank Manor, father of 10 children, a countryman, a hunting man, a man used to wooded swamplands by night.
Well, first beginning, we were watching television, and we have 6 dogs here, and they started raising a fuss, in which they never do much. So I went outside and gave a yell at them, and as I turned around to come back on the porch, I looked to the north of me, and looked like a fallen star. Radar. It was red and kind of coming down, and on about a 45, and so then I watched it, and I was going to see if it landed, and then maybe go down and see what it was. And when it got to the top of the trees, it stopped, and a blue and a white light come on it. And I looked at it, and I thought I was seeing things.
Frank Manor's UFO remained over his swamp more than 4 hours. His children saw it, his in-laws saw it, residents of the area saw it, the police saw it. No one photographed it, but Sergeant Newell Schneider of the Sheriff's Office remembered it well enough to draw it.
No, it moved very rapidly at any speed, or rather any direction it wanted to go. Why it could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
40 miles away, another swampland and another UFO sighting. This is Hillsdale, and the girls at Hillsdale College had a night to remember.
Well, when I was looking out the window with binoculars, I guess it was about 12, I saw it, and I saw 2 red lights, and I saw what looked to be shaped like a pie. I could just see the front of it, and I just saw the round front, and I could see the lights on either side. And then the red light was sort of casting a glow over the whole thing, so it looked like a round disc.
At first, when I'd heard the other girls talk about it, I believed them, yet I couldn't really make myself comprehend it because I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But then when I saw it, I just was fascinated. I wasn't afraid. I just wanted to stay there and keep my eyes glued to it. I couldn't leave.
I know I saw it, but, and I know myself I saw it, but I believe I saw it, but I can't fathom it because it seems so unreal.
William Van Horn, Hillsdale's undertaker and civil defense director, also spotted the UFO and was out with his Geiger counter next day, checking a mysterious perfect circle where the UFO had been seen. Van Horn did not find any radioactivity here, but this did not shake his certainty that he had seen a hovering vehicle with 2 lights. Many people ask him why he did not go right up to the UFO in the dark.
I'd much rather be a live coward than a dead hero. And with the area of uncertainty that we have here, how do I know but what maybe there's a current, an electrical charge which is being radiated by one of these vehicles which would electrocute you if you got within a certain area of it. There was no sound whatsoever. I could not hear a bit of sound.
National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena Director, Major Donald E. Kehoe, a retired Marine Corps officer, insisted that the Air Force knew more than it was telling.
We are being observed by some type of device which is ahead of us, far ahead of us, and is probably controlled by a highly advanced superior civilization. Now, this is a conclusion which I personally have stated and is shared by some members of our Board of Governors and advisors, not all of them. But it has reached to the point where many people in the Air Force have the same conclusion. In fact, the Air Force at one time had a top secret estimate that these things were interplanetary spaceships. So you will see that this, instead of being a subject for ridicule and a big joke, actually is a serious matter which could affect the lives of all of us.
And for the umpteenth time in as many years, the Air Force, called before a congressional committee, said it was hiding nothing. Air Force Secretary Harold Brown.
We have not been hiding anything. The investigations have been made public. The explanations of those where there is a clear explanation have been made public. The hearing this morning was public for just that reason. In those cases where for lack of data, for lack of a convincing hypothesis, the sighting has been kept in the unidentified category, we've been perfectly willing to say that too.
But if the Air Force had nothing to hide, Frank Manor, the Michigan farmer who had brought in the first report, was caught in the middle. He was mad.
Well, you can look at here. Look, beer bottles thrown. Look at my windshield. What would you think if somebody was throwing beer bottles at your house, standing out in the middle of the road screaming, you nut, you're fantastic, and all that? What would you think?
Are you sorry now that you did tell people what you saw?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry because not that it's not the truth, but it's just the idea, the reaction of the people. They think you're a nut. Tell you the truth, that's just what they figure you are. And I'm not going to take it no more. I don't want nobody down in here. I just leave me alone. And if the thing lands right there by that pump, I'd never say a word. And he got out and talked to me. I wouldn't tell nobody. That's just the way I feel. I'm bitter and disgusted in the whole matter. And if people's going to act like that, I hope one lands right in Ann Arbor, right in the middle of Detroit.
Only a few years ago, this would have been called an optical illusion, or it might have been called a miracle. But a man being powered through the air without benefit of plane or balloon is today a reality. Tomorrow, he may even be a traffic problem. There are jets that can rise straight up and then hover, like this British Hawker P-1127. The French also have experimented in this field. This is the Balzac, not a UFO. The Germans also are doing it. This is the EWR. Here it comes in for a landing. EWR, not UFO. The American XV-5A, built by Ryan, not only flies straight up and down, it also flies sideways and backwards. Northrop's wingless M2F2, otherwise known as the flying bathtub, is NASA's lifting reentry body, half plane, half spacecraft, landing like a conventional jet without power. Another wingless piece of airborne hardware is this lunar landing research vehicle at NASA's Research Center, looking more like a giant flying ant that might have come out of a Martian comic book. It will be used when we get to the moon. Small wonder that laymen seeing such things in newspapers, aviation, and trade journals, as well as in newsreels and on television, are ever more ready to believe anything. Where these are real, then others, more incredible, are most probably being tested in secret. However, all these vehicles operate within the laws of physics and aerodynamics, even though they may give the appearance of operating outside the laws of nature. But ufologists still insist there is more to it than this, and so there is. At England's Victoria and Albert Museum, CBS correspondent Frank Kern spoke to aeronautical historian Charles Harbord Gibbs Smith.
My position now, I think, is that I believe that about 5% of these things are interplanetary. That is, they come to us from a world outside our planetary system, and that some of them are in fact inhabited by intelligent beings of some kind, and some look as if they're remotely controlled. After all, who really do we think we are? We're a fifth-rate, miserable, measly little system out on the edge of the Milky Way, fooling around the universe with 4,000 or 5,000 years of so-called civilization behind us. We think we are the cat's whiskers, and we are not. We're a potty, second-rate lot, fifth-rate lot, conceited as apes, all of us. And here we go, and the moment anybody suggests that something should come in outside, from outside, we think, oh, no, it can't be that, It's quite out, you know, these things can't happen. And I think we're all, I do it myself, we're all thinking medievally.
What convinces you more than anything else?
The evidence of the men that have seen them, and primarily the behavior and descriptions of the objects themselves, which do not fit really any other explanation. And the Oldfield sighting, this thing which will become very famous, where a couple who live in a cottage outside Manchester took their first airline journey, and they had aboard a little film, a little cine camera, and they take pictures down of the fields as a couple would the first time they've ever been in an aeroplane, and she takes what she thinks is an aeroplane coming up from behind them, and then it goes out of vision in about 12 seconds or thereabouts, and she goes on taking a few more bits of the distant clouds and puts it back. And when they get to watch this thing, I mean, it's inexplicable by any, unless it's a straight fake. And to fake an 8mm film in color wants a lot of equipment. And who on earth are this charming couple, what would they be doing, lending themselves to faking these things? It is nothing airborne we've ever seen. I mean, it is basically sausage shaped with 2 dorsal and 2 ventral fins. And as you look at this film, it turns away on its vertical axis from you and disappears out that way. Well, I mean, you can argue until you're blue in the face. What is it except something that is airborne by a force, probably electrogravitic force of some kind that we know nothing whatever about? It is nothing conventional, it is nothing unconventional aerodynamically. There's no single piece of earth-borne equipment of any kind that can look and behave like that.
The Oldfields, indeed, had not faked anything, but the UFO in their film soon proved explainable. A few days later, an enterprising BBC cameraman took a similar camera, sat in the same seat, and filmed the same English countryside. The same UFO hovered into view, went through the same maneuvers, and disappeared into itself the same way. The UFO turned out to be the reflection of the tail section of the plane itself. Saucer fans are readers of science fiction. Much of it is written by highly respected scientists. On an even more popular level, the comic book adventures of Flash Gordon confirm saucer buffs in the plausibility of their beliefs. But all is not peaceful on the planet Earth, because the saucer addicts are divided into cults, groups, and sects that range from the skeptical sighters who hope there is a logical answer to the true believers who feel sure the answer is being covered up by the military establishment. Perhaps the farthest out group is made up of the Contactees. They have met, talked to, or even ridden with visitors from outer space. Here at Giant Rock in California's high desert country, one of the pioneer Contactees, George Van Tassel, talked to CBS News correspondent Bill Stout.
We're riding on an electrostatic magnetic ship right now on the Earth, doing 66,000 miles an hour right now in an orbit around the sun, and we're all astronauts in that respect.
Have you ever gone up close enough to touch one to see what was inside?
Bill, in August the 24th of 1953, I went aboard one for about 20 minutes.
What was it like? What happened?
Well, the interior walls were what looked like mother-of-pearl plastic, like we put on toilet seats and for decoration. The light inside seemed to come from everywhere. The instrument panel wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before, and all of my years since 1927 in the air game. And they had a compartment in the wall which both cleans and deodorizes their clothes by some light process, which required no water, soap, or detergents, or a washing machine.
Giant Rock, for the last 10 years, has been the Plymouth Rock of the saucer age. Saucer conventions were meeting here as far back as the pre-astronaut era of black and white television. But the Contactees storyline was the same, then as now.
Howard, would you tell us in your own words about your trip to Venus, how it started?
Well, as I say, it started first with a very decided tingling all over my body. This tingling finally extended to the mind area, and there was a clarification of mind, such as it's hard to believe. I seem to become one with the entire universe.
In the Valhalla of interplanetary contactees, the late George Adamski is regarded by his followers as something of a Christopher Columbus among outer space voyagers.
And you talked to him, you asked him?
I have, more or less on gestures and mental telepathy, as it is known, talk transfer.
He does not speak. I mean,
he didn't at the time, but I have met him since, and he does speak very well English as well as in the other language.
George Adamski was successful in attracting many disciples with film like this. He called it a spaceship from Venus. His critics call it a crude hoax. This film was obtained from one of Adamski's disciples, Mrs. Madeline Rotifer, who has made her own UFO film and who credits Adamski with an assist in her first contact with Venusians.
Some of them have even been to our home. And the day that the one came into the yard, which I filmed on the camera, there were 3 inside the ship.
Major Kehoe and his NICAP organization have little regard for the likes of Contactees, Rotifer and Adamski. They lean heavily on the testimony of professionals.
According to the United States Air Force, in following a policy which is set probably fairly high in the Pentagon, there are about 250 or 300 extremely incompetent and military pilots in this country. They're carrying passengers. They fly across the oceans, and they seem to be quite safe. The airlines let them continue to fly, even though they have reported UFOs. Now, this is not an attack on the Air Force spokesman or the project spokesman. They are simply following orders to explain away all UFO sightings as quickly as possible when they become public and deny that UFOs really exist.
The official Air Force reply has long been that there is no cover-up and there are no flying saucers from outer space. The Air Force position was detailed in this book by Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Tacker, who for many years was connected with the UFO project.
Our critics continually charge that the United States Air Force is withholding information from the general public on this subject. This is absolutely untrue. We are not hiding anything. We have nothing to hide. There is nothing in Air Force files, in either the classified files or the unclassified files, that come to a conclusion that spaceships have visited the Earth.
The astronomers have long been the leading theorists on the possibility of life in outer space. Astronomer Carl Sagan is consultant to a current Air Force scientific panel.
There is not a single verified or checked out report which is at all connectable with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It doesn't say that I think extraterrestrial life is impossible. Quite the contrary. I think that many of the stars in the sky have planetary systems. We know enough now about the origin of life to make it appear likely that life arises naturally on the vast bulk of these planets. It's possible, but by no means certain, that life on many of these planets evolves into beings which are as advanced as we, or more advanced. And I don't see any reason why we can't imagine that there are civilizations thousands or millions of years in advance of ourselves capable of technical feats that we can hardly imagine. If you would believe, as the flying saucer cultists would have us believe, that the majority of the saucer reports are due to visitations, then you have a very strange situation. That means several spaceships are coming to the Earth over interstellar distances every day, as if all the anthropologists in the world were to converge on one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean because they just invented the fishnet there or something. I think it's much more reasonable if you want to speculate on the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence, that there are very rare visits from extraterrestrials to the Earth. There's no evidence for this. I just say that's not implausible. But to have several visits a day, I think, is straining credulity. I think a key to what's behind the real belief in flying saucers is most easily obtained if you look at the contact myths. There are several hundred people in the United States who claim to have had personal contact with the inhabitants of flying saucers who have landed. And if you examine these myths, you find that there are some peculiar regularities. The inhabitants of saucers are benevolent. I mean, they're really concerned for our well-being. They're omnipotent, extremely powerful, omniscient, extremely knowledgeable, and they often wear long white robes. Now, this combination is something I've heard in another context. This isn't science, this is religion. And what I suspect is happening is this. We live in very unsettled times. It used to be possible to believe in a personal, benevolent, powerful, all-knowing God who cared about individuals who you could pray to. But now There's very few people who really believe that, I think. Science, for good or for ill, has destroyed a lot of the traditional theologies. And yet people have the same needs to believe that they always did, perhaps more so because of the times we live in. Well, the flying saucer myths are a really clever compromise. It's a way of having beings that come from the sky, that are worried about us, that are powerful, that are going to step in and prevent us from destroying ourselves, as we very well might, and yet have it in the cloak of science, so that no one can say, nonsense, that doesn't match science. It's all very pseudo-scientific.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating.
Nickel 6-1 Tango Project, over.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
Roger, there's troubleshooting as soon as I get...
Did you box moving target?
02.
No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly!